All right, well, let's head back home now. Yesterday, the State of the States report was released by Budget. And if you have been following Channels Television, you did see a bit of that conversation during our sister program, Morning Brief. Let's look at the other aspects now of it. Here in business, we dissect it even closer. So the report did show that in the 2023 fiscal year, combined revenue of all states in the country increased by 31.2%. It went from 6.6 trillion naira to 8.66 trillion naira. So you want to ask, where did it go to? What has it been used for? We saw that 32 states relied on FAC receipt for at least 55% of their total revenue, while 14 relied on FAC for at least 70% of that. Total expenditure across 36 states reached 9.78 trillion naira. That indicates a 21.19% increase from the previous year. Total expenditure went up. Aggregate operating expenses of state, well, even in the private sector, cost of sales is also going up. So aggregate operating expenses of state from 47.36, that showed an increase of 21.17%. And then total debt stock, obviously very interesting, of the state increased by over 38% from 7.25% in 2022 to 10.01%. And this was partially driven by an increase in domestic debts year on year. Now, let's talk to the researchers and proponents of that report. We're now speaking with the country director, Mr. Gabriel Okelwo of Budget, joins us from our Abuja studio. Hi, Gabriel, good afternoon, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you very much, Ini. Good afternoon.
Yeah, well, we have to thank you for this report, shining the light on the state. Sometimes it does seem like there's so much attention on the federal, and we do not remember that the states also have a huge responsibility. So we have to appreciate that now. But on the whole, now tell us, what does this report, the state of the states, what does it tell us? We've seen expenditures increase, debt has increased, but also revenue has increased. I guess we can, in one way or the other, connect that to the removal of subsidy. I wonder if that's it, or looking at the timing. But just tell us a summary. What are some of those high points or highlights of your report?
Thank you very much, Ini. I mean, the State of States report is a flagship research project by Budget Foundation. And I mean, we've been doing this for over the last 9 years. The report that was released yesterday is the 9th edition of the State of State report. And this is just, a report gives us opportunity to bring the books of all the 36 states in Nigeria to public scrutiny, and Budget, as a civic society organization, takes that up as a responsibility. So the data that is presented in that report is not a data that is generated by Budget. They are data that were crawled from the audited financials, most of them from the Debt Management Office, from the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, that represents, the fiscal health of the 36 states. And there are about 5 indexes that we use in that research. The first is looking at the capacity of the states to, meet their operating obligation using only the internally generated revenue from the states. The second is to look at the effort of the states to improve internally generated revenue. The third is to look at the combined revenue of the states. When you put the capital receipts, you put the federal, the FAC allocation, you put the IGR, you put all of those, revenue sources together, and you put that side by side with the overall obligation or liability of the states, looking at how well is this overall, revenue able to meet the expenditure or the liability of the states. And, the fourth and the fifth, the fourth index looks at the debt sustainability. I mean, we know that in our climate, which is not peculiar to Nigeria. Many governments rely on debt, both foreign loans and domestic loans, to be able to meet some of these, obligations that they have to meet. But at the same time, we then assess this debt sustainability of the state. How long will it take a state to be able to, pay up their debt? What is the burden that the debt is putting on the revenue capacity? And then the last one is to look at that component of the budget that is critical to the people, which is the capital expenditure. How well are the states prioritizing investment in capital expenditure? And by and large, I mean, overall, you will see that because the assessment, the 2024 State of State use the books or the revenue and the books of the state for the fiscal year 2023. When you put the fiscal year 2023 side by side with 2022, you will see that there were numbers of increases, right? The overall revenue of all the 36 states increased significantly from 6 trillion in 2022 to about 8.6 trillion in 2023. When you look at IGR, also, FAC distribution, that also grew, and that can account for the combined growth that we saw on the revenue side. But it's not just that. On the operating side, there was also growth in that. There were increase in the debt stock. There were increase. So when we put that all together, we'll see that. So for example, and one of the points you mentioned in your question is the impact of subsidy, right? Because sometimes, I mean, this administration came into power in May 2023, and PMS subsidy was suspended, and we saw that, in how much that was now available to be shared among the three tiers of government, and that accounts for this increase that we saw on the combined revenue side. So yes, we saw that increase. What on the other side we now have to put together with that is the impact of this increase on the people. And this year, we pick a sub thing, looking at the health sector. How much is the state allocating to health sector? How much are were the actual releases or the actual expenditure? And when we looked at that, just looking at the health sector alone, we realized that combinedly about 2.3 trillion was allocated to health sector from all the 36 states in Nigeria. But at the end of the fiscal year 2023, budget performance on the health sector alone was just about 1.39 trillion, which represents 58% budget performance. Now, health is critical to the masses. So the increase that we saw in revenue, of course, there are several things that state government can justify that they spread this, increase to. There are other sectors. There is education. There is, a lot of empowerment programs that the states have been doing as part of the economic shock subsidy. But looking at health, in our research that we released this year, we saw that the budget performance to health sector was not encouraging. It's not encouraging. I mean, 58% budget performance to health sector is not encouraging. So this report is put out, and we like this platform for engagement. There are also backdoor engagement that is going to be going on, with the critical sector, with the critical stakeholders at the state, subnational level, for us to be able to see how this report can be used to drive fiscal reforms.
Yeah, well, obviously, that's one of the reasons we're having this conversation. The other one is the reliance on FAC. We've always been talking about how states ought to increase their internally generated revenue with so much resources in different parts of the country. But we see from that report that the list of the states, they depend on FAC to at least 55%. We have the group that depends as much as 70%. So I wonder how you think we can use this to challenge perhaps the governors to look inwards more and rely less on FAC.
Yes, I mean, I know when we talk about FAC, most of the time it's always like a sensitive conversation, because on other hand, some other, school of thought will tell you that this revenue were, initially generated from all these states. So saying that they are relying on it may not be the right narrative to use. But we also know that all the states in Nigeria don't bring the same thing to the purse, to the federal purse, right? And that is why we will continue to assess the dependence on FARC. A situation where about 32 out of 36 states in Nigeria, have more than 50% reliance on FARC allocation or cause for attention. Because and we can say that may not change because there is a constitutional backing to that. But should there be, a situation where the revenue that accrue to federal purse is shocked, right? What then happens to the states that do not have capacity to generate enough enough revenue internally to be able to meet the obligation? And we have seen a sign of this during the COVID-19 situation, where a lot of our crude oil were not being sold because the countries that will usually take our products were all on lockdown, right? And that is why we'll measure that. So it is a critical component. And even for the states that seems to be generating huge revenue for the federal government before it is shared back to them, we are also saying, can you also put efforts into improving internally generated revenue, right? So that should anything happens to this source, you have multiple sources. It is just like a case of a businessman. You just don't want to put all your sustainability and your livelihood on one source of income, because anything, a government policy, an action or inaction of any stakeholder can affect this one source of income, and then you can find yourself in a mess struggling to survive. And that is the justification for increase, advocacy on improving internally generated revenue. In the past, we have had, a research into the investment capacity or the investment capacity that we have in all the 36 states in Nigeria. And it will interest you to know that all the 36 states in Nigeria, God has blessed us with one natural resource or the other. So what we are using this report to do is to nudge the state government to not just take the position of, every month there is a fund that is coming, whether we take we use our initiative or not, this federally, distributed revenue is coming. We are saying move away from that mentality and begin to look into how can you harness number one, what natural resources is available in your state, and how can you, harness these natural resources and connect it to the global market. The most of the economic issues we are facing in Nigeria today is because Nigeria as a nation, we are not playing big in the global market, right? And that makes us very susceptible to, exchange of fluctuation and whatever we see in the exchange market, we have to face it because we don't have anything to compete in that market.
Yeah, unfortunately, and yes, we do have the potential, but it would be interesting if we could go to the debts and all of that and what they're actually doing with the increase in revenue they're getting from FAC, but time forbids us to do that. So I have to thank you so much, Country Director of Budget, Gabriel Okewo, for your time. And well, we expect more reports from Budget.
Thank you very much, Ini.